Hello, this is Lucent, back for part 2 of my developer spotlight of the Eidolon mod for Minecraft 1.16. In the last video, I talked about how you get started, and I'm basically picking up right where that one left off. You can see in the background I've got my little altar that I set up last time. Um, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you some of the other things you can do in the mod while you're waiting to progress in Theurgy, since you're, limited to only one of these per day. I'm going to go over here just to show some of these things off, so I have a little bit more space. You'll probably want some flat space for this, because essentially, today we're going to be talking about rituals. Specifically this one, to get started, the Crystallization ritual. All rituals sort of follow the same basic pattern. We start with a brazier, which we craft with some pewter and a block of coal, and we just put it down, like so. We'll also need some stone hands, which are very simple. They're just crafted out of stone. And we'll want like a couple of these. For our very first one, this crystallization ritual, we'll only need 2. And essentially, the way that these work is that rituals have a central item, which goes on the brazier, like the page would indicate. We have some ingredients, which we need to provide, in this case, 2 redstone dust. And then we need to light the brazier in order to activate the ritual and get some kind of cool effect. So I can grab the ingredients and you can just right-click them onto whatever you want to add them to. So in this case, we'll put our bone meal on the center. We'll put our redstone dust around the outside. This is everything we need for the ritual. The last thing we need to do for the crystallization ritual specifically is we'll need some undead creatures around because it'll be destroying them, and we're going to want to see that. So let me make some a little enclosure here, just a little impromptu prison. I don't want them to burn during the day, so we'll just do this. Yeah, we'll have a wraith, maybe a couple wraiths. That should be good. All right. So we've got our ingredients, we've got our mobs. The last thing to do is to light the ritual and see what happens. All right, as you can see, it destroys the mobs. And we get 5 soul shards. Each mob can drop between 1 and 3. Soul shards are incredibly useful. You can see that they're used in a bunch of crucible recipes, a huge number of workbench recipes, and basically every other ritual in the mod. So you're going to want a good number of these. And as you can see, it's a little involved to collect them. I'd recommend probably taking some nights on however you play this mod. During the nighttime, sometimes try to gather maybe a horde of zombies or some skeletons or something. Any undead mob will do. Hopefully you can try to use enchanted ash to trap them a bit like I did. You don't necessarily need a huge amount, like you don't need like stacks and stacks, but you'll want like a good number, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's the crystallization ritual. That's the first ritual you'll need to do. We can also use rituals for our benefit. So, well, I suppose the crystallization ritual is also to our benefit, but instead of just sort of getting ingredients, we can also use rituals to actually achieve certain magical effects. One of the simplest ones of these, let's see, what should we do? Let's do a time ritual. So this is the ritual of moonlight, and this will accelerate time until it becomes night. And luckily, it's fairly straightforward to do. Let me just grab another stone hand. I'll replace this real quick. As you can see in the book, we're going to need a black dye on our brazier, 2 soul shards, a spider eye, and a snowball. Luckily, all of these are relatively straightforward to acquire, so we'll just grab our ingredients. What was the last one? A black dye. Yeah, okay. So, black dye, snowball, spider eye, 2 soul shards, and we light the brazier. And you're going to want to watch the sky while this one is active. All right, basically did exactly what it said on the tin. The Moonlight Ritual has brought the moon out and accelerated time forward, so it's now night. There's a counterpart to this, which is the Daylight Ritual, which, as you'd imagine, accelerates it to day. But because I'm in cheating creative mode, we're gonna just time set it to day. Okay, so that's the basics of rituals. You basically just come up with a recipe like this, add it to your brazier, supply the other ingredients around it in some stone hands, and you get a cool magical effect. There's one other mechanic, though, that I want to talk about before we move on, and that's the concept of a focus. It's talked about a little bit here. So as you can see, we talk about stone hands, we can put items in them. There's also something called the Necrotic Focus. This one's a little bit more involved to craft. It takes some pewter and a bone. If we pull one out real quick, and I like to put this on a block just for aesthetics. The Necrotic Focus on its surface behaves very similarly to a stone hand. We can right-click items into it, right-click them out of it, and it'll basically act like a stone hand as far as providing ingredients to a ritual as well. So we can just use this for whatever ritual we want. But it has some special effects. And this doesn't really apply to all rituals, but for some, like summoning, the focus is actually crucial to selecting exactly what you want your ritual to do. You'll notice that all rituals have just one starting item. For example, we have Summon Zombie here, which starts with some charcoal. You'll notice that no matter what summoning ritual we want to do, it always starts with charcoal. So how do we select which mob we want to summon? In this case, we just use a focus. So you can see with the ingredients, we're going to need like a soul shard, a rotten flesh, and then another rotten flesh inside a focus in order to summon a zombie. Let's use a wither skeleton actually as a demonstration so it doesn't burn in the sun. If we want to summon a wither skeleton, we can grab our ingredients. So we're going to need a soul shard, we're going to need a bone, we're going to need some charcoal on our brazier, and then in our focus, we're going to need the selector item, which in this case is, if I can find it, some soul sand. We put that in our focus like so. Now that we've got all of our ingredients together, we can light the brazier, wait for it to activate, and just like usual, the ritual consumes the items, and bam, we've summoned a wither skeleton to the overworld. Very nice. All right, that's the basics of foci. I still don't know how exactly you say that word. Essentially, again, they don't apply to everything, but for some rituals, you'll need a focus to specify what sub-ritual you want to use out of all of its different variants. It applies to summoning, and it applies to the sanguine ritual, which we'll talk about maybe in the last video. And potentially some other rituals down the line. We'll see. But that's essentially all there is to know about rituals. I'm not going to go over all the rest of them, but there are quite a few more. They all have useful effects, and a lot of them will actually just stay active indefinitely without any fuel or any cost. So definitely take that into consideration and give them a shot. Okay, so that's rituals. That's one of the big mechanics of the mod. Let's talk about the next step, which is Artifice. So you can see in the Artifice chapter, there's actually a bunch of stuff here, a ton of magic items we can make. This is probably where you're going to get most of the useful things out of Eidolon right now. And it basically comes down to two main mechanics that allow us to craft using some of the ingredients we get through other aspects of the mod, specifically soul shards. I'm going to start with the crucible, which is crafted quite simply with 7 pewter, like so. The crucible might remind you of crucibles and cauldrons from other mods you know. I'm going to put this one over some magma, because I think it's a little bit more subtle. But you can use fire, lava, or any other heat source you want. I'm also going to get some water. You can see after a short period of time, the water starts to boil. This is the state that allows us to start using the altar to craft items. Sorry, not the altar, the crucible. In order to craft using the crucible, we'll need some sort of recipe to use it for. Let's start by crafting some arcane gold. As you can see, crucible recipes come in multiple steps. We've got step 1 and step 2. In step 1, we add 2 redstone dust and a soul shard to the crucible, and in step 2, we add 2 gold. And that gives us some arcane gold, which is this cool gold alloy that we will be using for most of our magical items that we craft. So let me just get the ingredients real quick. There we go, 1 soul shard. And essentially the way the crucible works is that we just toss in items to craft with them. But before we go on to the next step, we want to wait for the color to change. So there we go, the color changed. We can toss in our gold. And because that completes the recipe, we get our arcane gold ingots, which, as you can see, are used for a pretty decent variety of items. So that's a useful resource. That's probably one of the first things you'll want to craft with the crucible. There's one other mechanic with the crucible that I would like to show off, which is stirring. So it doesn't show up in the arcane gold recipe, and a lot of simple recipes won't require you to stir, but some of the more advanced ones, like lesser soul gem, which is a means of combining soul gems and increasing their power, will actually require some stirs. So you can see in step 1 of this recipe, we had 2 redstone and 2 lapis. In step 2, we had 4 soul shards and also stir 2 times. Finally, we add some quartz. Stirring is fairly easy, but it's important to remember to do it. Otherwise, just as if you had forgotten an ingredient, the recipe will fail and you'll lose your items. So definitely try to be careful. Also try to be fast, because you only have so much time to actually get this, to actually get your recipe right. So if I prep with all of the ingredients, we can try to make a lesser soul gem. So essentially, our step 1 doesn't change, but in step 2, we'll need to stir 2 times. And that can be done like so. Just like the first recipe, we add the ingredients for our first step first. Then we add our second step ingredients and stir twice. And finally, we add our quartz. And we've succeeded. We've gotten a lesser soul gem, which is used for, again, a bunch of cool magical items. Definitely be careful. If you stir the wrong number of times, or if you stir, too few times, it can mess up the whole recipe. So you really got to have some care and attention to detail when you're working with the crucible. The worst thing that's going to happen is just that you lose your items, but that's never fun. So I recommend getting all the ingredients lined up in your hotbar before you actually try to use it. That's just me. You can try to live dangerously if you want, but may not always work out. That's essentially all there is to the crucible. We use it for a lot of different stuff. You can see it actually has quite a few recipes. They range from ingredients that we use for magical items, like this soul gem, to utility recipes, like this is a means of turning rotten flesh to leather. So there's a lot of stuff you can use it for, but it's mostly not going to be how you get your cool, powerful new gadgets. It's more so just a means for you to get some crafting ingredients. In terms of actually making magical gadgets, then, we're actually going to need this thing called the magic workbench. This is crafted like so, with some wood, some pewter, and some red carpet. And if we place it down and open it up, you can see it basically just looks like a crafting table. We've got our central crafting slots, but we've got also these 4 additional slots around the outside. These work essentially as you'd expect. Most recipes with the arcane work table, and actually we can use this for normal crafting recipes as well. So let's get some maybe arcane gold, and we can turn this into nuggets and back into ingots and stuff like that. So it works like a normal crafting table. But for some recipes, and let's pull up an easy one, like let's say we want to make the resolute belt. For some recipes, we'll use the additional 4 slots to augment it in some ways, usually adding some special reagents or magic items to empower the item. So for the resolute belt, we're going to need a couple things. Let me just show you how this works. It's not too complicated, but I might as well walk through how the actual crafting process works. We're going to need a basic belt, which is crafted like so with some leather. We'll need some gold inlay as well, which is just crafted with arcane gold. We're going to need some soul shards, which we already have, some enchanted ash, and a leather. Oh, and a diamond. It's a bit of an expensive item, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't require too much progression, so that's why we're doing it first. Oh, I forgot to get the belt. All right. Okay, so we've added our core items, we add our outer items, and now we can craft a resolute belt. Nice. That's all we need to do. This is a curio, and there's quite a few curios in the mod. It'll go into our belt slot, and just to demonstrate it real quick, let me spawn in a spider. Hopefully it doesn't kill me. If I can get it to attack me, you can see there's a little sound that plays, and whenever it hits me, I don't take any knockback. Instead, it actually gets bounced back a little bit. So that's what the Resolute Belt does. It gives you 100% knockback resistance, and also reflects that knockback a little bit onto your attacker. So it's very good if you don't want to get moved around in combat. The magic workbench has a lot of uses. As you can see, there's a bunch of recipes, a bunch of different magic items you can make in this mod, and a lot of them are very interesting. I'm not going to cover all of them. I'll be covering a few more in the last video of this series, but for now, that's actually most of what I wanted to talk about as far as core mod mechanics go. We've got the crucible and the work table, or the workbench, I suppose, that allow us to craft items. And we've got some rituals which allow us to use our soul shards to get some fun magical effects. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about how we advance further in theurgy, with some more advanced prayers and learning some new signs. And then after that, maybe in the same video, maybe in a different one, I'll be talking about some of the magic items you can get in this mod that make it worthwhile. But for now, I've been Elucent. This was part 2 of my developer spotlight of the Eidolon mod, and I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, see you next time.